Hello, I'm Hannah from Full Abilities. Today I'm with another member of our team, Iga, and we also here with today's guest, with Elise Cruz. She is a family medicine doctor. So welcome, Elise. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do, who you are?
Absolutely. So, good morning, and thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you all wanting to talk with me. As I said, my name is Dr. Elise Cruz. I'm a family medicine physician out of Minnesota, in the United States. I am a what we call a patient physician. I am a physician that actually has the medical condition that I often see patients for. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And I Today, it sounds like we're going to be talking a little bit more about kind of my journey and navigating having a disability and working in the medical field.
Yes, so you're diagnosed with EDS. Can you tell us a little bit more about what it is and about your experience with it?
Absolutely. So I actually have a very specific type of EDS called myopathic Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. Ehlers-Danlos syndrome is actually a spectrum of genetic conditions that impact connective tissue. Most often with Ehlers-Danlos, we see it impact collagen, which is a big, huge building block in our body. I think it's about 20 to 30% of our dry body weight is just collagen. And so with that abnormality, it causes issues literally from head to toe. We see tons of collagen in things like skins, ligaments, and tendons, and that's why these patients often will have skin issues, healing skin concerns, as well as joint hypermobility. But there's other things like chronic pain, stomach issues, nervous issues, things of that sort. I was diagnosed when I was about 11 or 12 years old. I was showing symptoms as young as I was 2 or 3. Both my sibling and I were showing symptoms, and saw many different providers. And it was actually kind of a fluke that I got my diagnosis. One of my cousins was diagnosed with it. And at that time, I was dislocating joints. I was having a lot of joint pain, a lot of joint issues. And I've been seeing my pediatric orthopedic surgeon for almost 4 to 5 years by the time that my cousin was diagnosed. And they're like, oh, well, that makes sense why you're so hypermobile. So I was originally diagnosed as hypermobile EDS, and within the last year, we did genetic testing and actually found out I have a super rare subtype called myopathic Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. So my experience with it, I think with all of us with chronic conditions, is it's ever changing. It's a journey. Every day is different as our bodies age and change, and as we age with our disability. I think I'm someone that's in my early 30s and kind of adjusting to what my body needs and support now versus 10 years ago are very different. So it's a constant learning for ourselves, and learning what our community knows as we grow together.
From what I've noticed, there are many people that from chronic illness disability community that want to get into medical field. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience as someone who also suffers from a chronic condition, in med school and now as a working physician?
Absolutely. I When I got my original diagnosis, I really wasn't told a whole lot. And back when it happened in the probably early 2000s, there wasn't a lot of information out there. So I know when I was diagnosed, I was sent to physical therapy, given some braces, and that was kind of it. I was never told what I could do or couldn't do. So anyway, I always wanted to go off to university, and my mother actually went back to nursing school when I was a very young child. So I cannot always been around the medical field. I really love science. And I knew that even getting into medical school was going to be a big challenge, regardless. I faced a lot of hurdles. I had to pay for my own schooling. So I was working many jobs while going to university. Once I was in medical school, I had no idea that I could have had accommodations. There were many times where I struggled to be able to get certain things done just because of my physical ability. There were rotations where I openly spoke about my disability and actually were kind of told, hush, hush, let's not talk about it. And then I'd be quiet. And then in my next rotation, I would have a dislocation and I would scare my attending who said, well, why didn't you tell me? So it was a very interesting journey through medical school and trying to figure out things. And honestly, it wasn't until I was in residency, so our junior doctor training after medical school, when I was training to be family medicine, that I learned about accommodations. I had just done my third 24-hour shift delivering babies that I was in tears. I was in so much pain from not only being awake, but being on my feet. I know my body could not physically handle that. And I was talking to a colleague who had accommodations for one of their medical conditions, and they looked at me and they're like, well, why don't you have accommodations? I go, what? I can have support. And so that was really eye-opening to me for what I could have for my body. And I carried that on through, and I was very open and vocal when I was applying for jobs of, I am a disabled physician. I need to know that I'm going to have support to not only provide for myself, but provide for my patients. Because if I don't take care of myself first, how the world am I going to take care of my patients? So it's been a journey. It's been hard. There's been times where, I think I've got all the accommodations I need, and it's like, oh nope, I need another step or another break or support. I have longer visits with my patients than most physicians. I have a catch-up spot sometimes, so that I have the ability to do that. Even have sometimes if I need to do virtual clinics with my patients, I have that accessibility too. But I'm constantly learning and understanding accommodations that are out there. I work with my patients all the time, be it in school or work or even from home, of what we can do to help support them in their bodies so they can, live their best lives.
So, do you have any advice for people who want to get into medical field, like about accommodations and stuff like that?
I think right now is knowing that there's going to be lots of hurdles. There's got to be lots of ups and downs. I'm very honest. My very first to get into medical school here, I had to do a big test called the MCAT, and my first test did not go well. I had a lot of professors who said, "Oh, you should consider switching to another medical field or other consideration." So there's a lot of hiccups. I think talking to any of your disability offices through your university or school or in the community to know what support's out there. I think EDS community is much more connected now because of social media. So we can people talk all the time about like, oh, accommodations, be it mobility aids or school accommodations. There's a website called Ask Jane that actually talks about all the physical accommodations we'll often see for Ehlers-Danlos. So I'll send that to my patients to say, hey, you may not even think of what you might need. Here's a whole website that kind of lays out all these different things that people have helped supported their body. I think a lot of us, it's tough because we have to be very strong advocates for ourselves. And it's finding that team and building that around you, because you're going to get tired. You're going to get exhausted for saying, hey, I need this other accommodation. Hey, I need this other support. But know that you deserve it. You deserve to be in that space. And those areas should be supporting you, because disabled persons deserve to be at that table and to be able to have not only their voices themselves seen, but also their voices heard.
I think you talked about it a little bit, but how has your disability impacted your relationship with patients? Has it helped you understand their pain in any way?
I hear it kind of almost every single day. I have one day a week that's designated for Ehlers-Danlos. As patients all the time say, thank you for understanding. Thank you for being able to relate. Thank you for simply getting it. I also have POTS, so postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. So when I had a patient the other day who I'm like, yeah, summertime can be worse for us because the higher temperature can absolutely impact our heart rates. And they're like, thank you for saying that without me even having to say that. There's almost this sigh of relief from a patient when, they look at me, they're like, well, why do you take care of people with ADS? And I'm like, because I have this condition. And their whole body just naturally just relaxes in that sigh of like, I don't have to try and prove myself. This is someone that has that lived in experience and gets it and understands it. As well as I'm very open about my accommodations. I don't work completely full time because I know my body can. And I want other people to feel like they see other people that can do it. It's not easy. There's definitely many days that I struggle, but it's my patience, and seeing what they've been able to do, even within a year of us working together, has just been, it's what keeps me going on many days.
I mean, being understood is all we as patients really want, which sometimes or most of the times we don't really get, which is quite sad. But I think that's also why people with disabilities or chronic illnesses should be included in that space, because they can also just support patients who are suffering from similar or the same things. So yeah, that's really great that you, even though you had to just go through all the obstacles, and it's not easy. Thank you for doing it, because I'm sure that so many patients of yours are just very grateful for that. So do you think that science will advance enough that in the future distant or not so distant patients with disabilities or genetic conditions that are now thought as being not curable will be curable? And if so, is there something that we can do to help scientists and researchers make that happen?
I think there is that potential. I think that's what a lot of research right now is working towards, of how can we, quote unquote, cure or be able to manage or treat someone with a genetic condition through genetic modification. I think we're still a ways off from it, but I think that's where a lot of research is going, and I think it's an absolute possibility for it in the future. There is a lot of also ethics and consideration behind it, because being disabled should not be seen as a bad thing, that it should not be seen as a thing that shouldn't belong in those spaces and community and in our society. With things that are going on in medicine, I think we're absolutely getting close to there. I think the best way that we can help as those in the disabled community, and especially the genetic community, is participating in research. I know here in the United States, Norris Lab is our big hypermobile EDS research lab, and being active in those different research groups that are looking at the genetics, or the genetic, what we call etiology, so the base of where something's coming from. Because the more data that researchers have to work with is going to help them accelerate their understanding, research. I think that's the biggest thing that we can do, is participating. And sometimes it's not even just genetic research. Is it a survey talking about what would be more helpful for accommodations? Is it a community group that sits down and talks about their lived-in experience and other ways that they support their bodies outside of medicine or physical therapy or braces? So talking about other things that they felt have been helpful for their bodies. So I feel like I've seen that a ton more in the last 5 years through social media, which is amazing. But I think that's been the best way that we can help provide for others.
How could society and community be supportive of disabled people?
That's a really great question. I honestly think it's inclusivity without us having to ask again and again and again. Be it language, talking about disabled and not other abled or other bodied. It's also having the ability to be accommodating and flexible for ourselves, be it scheduling. So like I said, having the ability to do virtual visits for my patients. I think that's been so helpful for many of them, to be able to get medical care where it might be challenging to travel or make that distance to come into a physical clinic. It's having spaces that are inclusive for everyone. It blows my mind how many times going into a building that I'm like, this is not non-able-bodied friendly. There's only stairs, or there's an elevator that doesn't work, or the ramp is very hard to find, or like all those little things that people don't think about who are are able-bodied. It's that inclusion that, again, like I feel like we've had to ask, and they keep asking us when we're like, we've told you this a million times. So it's that inclusivity and not being kind of labeled as a superhero because of our disability. We're just a human. We're a human being with a disability, and we just want to be treated like one.
To what extent do you agree with the statement that current medical system fails chronically ill or disabled patients?
I think right now it's a lot of systems are learning, and we're trying to move out of that ableist system, and it's tough because every place has its challenges. I think we're moving towards a better and more inclusive future, but I think there's still a distance to go. And I think we also need to see more, again, disabled voices that are at those tables, that can speak about their experiences, instead of it being a bunch of able-bodied persons that are assuming or only kind of talk about their minimal interactions with persons who are disabled.
Is there anything else you'd like to add that we haven't covered but you think is important?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's understanding and accepting that vulnerability of asking for support and help. Many of us, struggle to do that, again, because we have to advocate time and time again, and realizing we know what our bodies need. The first time that I used a cane in public, I was terrified. I was so scared of the looks I was going to get in the stairs that I was to get from other people, not thinking of like my body needed. I was actually on vacation. And the first 2 days of the trip, I'm like, oh, I'm not, I brought my canes with me and I'm like, I'm not going to use them. I'll be fine. And the end of that second day, I was in a lot of pain. I was hurting. And so the third day I finally used my cane and I didn't get the stares and looks I was expecting. I was at Disney World, so I definitely had a couple kids that asked questions, but I was thankful for them to ask those questions and to see a person of my age using a cane, so they realize that like anyone, whoever needs it, can absolutely use it. And so it is. I think a lot of us struggle to accept that, to say, yes, this is what my body needs, and it's okay if society says, oh, you're so and so, you're too young to need a mobility aid. No, 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 no. I know what my body needs and I'm going to use what my body needs, and that's okay. So it's a lot of it sometimes is just accepting that, and it's really hard. I still have days where I struggle of like, do I really need to use my mobility aid? Yeah, I do. And that's okay.
Yeah, I really do understand that, because with mobility aids, there's just something, I wouldn't say necessarily difficult, but just you are afraid of the looks you're going to get, or that people, whatever people will think. I'm not going to get into that, but it's just I think it takes a lot of practice and years of training yourself to think differently, to be able to use mobility aids or accommodations without that fear. So that's all the questions we have for you today. I would like to thank you so much for being here, for sharing your story with us. I think it's very valuable, and I hope that people who are watching will also think so as well.
Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for all that you're doing. And I appreciate you listening to my story.
Okay, so again, thank you, and I hope you're going to have a good day, and bye bye.